Sir, this ticket looks fake. Tracy Holloway, the lead flight attendant, let her voice slice through first class, sharp enough to turn heads. Another passenger leaned in, smirking. These people always try to sneak in. You can tell just by looking. And just like that, the system chose its side. Malcolm Everett, seated quietly in 2 amperes, said nothing. He absorbed the insult with the stillness of someone who had seen it before. But then came the turn. A single phone call. The captain's radio buzzing with orders from headquarters ground. This flight. Now. The cabin froze. The balance of power shattered. By landing, humiliation had become evidence. What happens when the quietest man in the room owns the sky above it? Where are you listening to this story from? Drop it in the comments below. And if you believe stories like this matter, subscribe now so you never miss the next one. Now, let's begin. Wheels hummed against the carpet as the late boarding call washed over the gate like a tired tide. The jet bridge exhaled conditioned air, cool and lemon bright. First class glowed in warm lamplight, a row of orchids set like trophies on the bulkhead. Malcolm Everett stepped through the door with a hood up against the drizzle and an old leather briefcase hooked in his fingers. The case had a crease down the spine, a scar that looked earned. He moved with the stillness of someone who didn't need to be noticed, to be in charge. "Welcome," said the flight attendant at the door, the smile automatic. "Tracy Holloway." Red lipstick is exactly a warning sign. On her nameplate, the letters shone, Senior Flight Attendant. She scanned the cabin first, then him. Hoodie. Jeans clean but not new. Shoes practical. He didn't fit her picture at first. Her posture sharpened, like a ruler laid along the edge of a paper. Malcolm didn't hurry. He glanced along the seats, as if studying them for a report. 1 ampere empty. 1C occupied by a woman in noise-canceling headphones. 2 amperes. His seat. 3C. A man with a navy blazer already half reclined. 4D. A woman with gray braids and reading glasses sliding down her nose. 6 amperes. Back in main cabin plus. A teenager with a phone and a ring light clipped to the case. Malcolm slid the briefcase strap higher on his shoulder and rolled his wrist once, as if resetting a metronome. His breathing stayed even. "Boarding pass, please," Tracy said. "Hand out." Palm flat. He extended his phone. The barcode pulsed on the screen. She didn't scan. She looked. Her brow drew in. "Sir, where are you seated today?" Her tone said she already knew his answer was wrong. 2 amperes. The man in 3C looked up with a smirk that had been waiting all day for a reason. Richard Wallace. Tan from somewhere expensive, cufflinks with a monogram too large for their size. First class as private club. He tracked Malcolm like a security camera tracks motion, then returned to his whiskey. Tracy's smile tightened. "Let me just verify." She angled the phone toward the ambient light instead of the scanner, buying herself a second to frame the scene. Professional, poised, superior. She enjoyed the role. Once, months ago, she had caught a counterfeit printout at this very door. The purser had praised her judgment in front of a supervisor. "Good eye, Holloway," he had said, and she had stood a little taller for the rest of that week. The memory lifted her chin now. Behind Malcolm, the cabin rustled. Wheels stuttered to a stop. A zipper whispered shut. The woman in 4D looked up from her book. Mrs. Lorraine Carter. She pressed her fingers into the armrest. Not out of fear of flying, but fear of familiarity. The shape of this moment was one she knew too well. At 6 amperes, the teen adjusted the ring light and mouthed something to the camera. Her stream counter jumped. She tilted to catch the vibe, the way a weather vane catches wind. Tracy lifted the phone closer, eyes moving over the name, then the airline logo, then the seat she hadn't scanned. She didn't need to, she told herself. You can tell. The barcode could say anything. People try things. The thought smoothed the path to certainty. "Everything all right?" Malcolm asked. Not impatient, just precise. Routine verification, she said. To the cabin, she added a volume shade brighter. Just a moment, everyone. The performance was for them as much as for him. Her shoulders squared to make a frame. He set the briefcase on the seat edge at 2 amperes, occupying half the cushion. He didn't sit. He didn't explain. He just waited, eyes steady, a tide at slack water. Richard Wallace's smirk grew legs. Smooth day for it. He said to no one, and to everyone. His voice carried, practiced by boardrooms and golf starters. He let his gaze pass over Malcolm and then away, like he was brushing lint from lapel. A soft beep came from the galley as another attendant closed an overhead. The PA crackled. "Final cabin count in 2 minutes," someone said. The jet bridge was still attached. The door seal even breathed faintly, a whisper of outside weather. Somewhere forward, the cockpit switches clicked with the clean confidence of checklists. Tracy angled the phone again, thumb hovering over the scanner, as if mercy could be dispensed by a simple tap. She looked up at Malcolm and saw no plea in his face, just presence. That unsettled her more than protest would have. "Do you have a physical copy of the ticket?" she asked, still not scanning. "I have what you asked for." His voice was low, calm. It made her hear her own. The woman in 4D shifted forward. "Excuse me," Mrs. Lorraine Carter said, her voice carrying a church's worth of patience and an entire country's fatigue. "Is there a problem?" She made eye contact with Tracy, not with Malcolm. It was mercy aimed where it might land. "We'll resolve it," Tracy replied, smile returning like a mask lowered back into place. She held the phone at a new angle, and for a heartbeat, she considered simply scanning, hearing the beep, and moving on. Then she saw the hoodie again, the scuffed corner of the briefcase, the ease with which he occupied the space. Who walks into first like he owns the place? Her thoughts fed and answered themselves. Behind them, 6 Amperes' camera caught the tableau. The uniform, the hoodie, the breath of a pause that could become a story. The chat bloomed. Boarding tea. What's happening? Bro? In first? The teen bit her lip, choosing a filter. Tracy's memory replayed the purser's praise. Her shoulders squared farther, a lock clicking shut. She leaned into the role that had once earned her that commendation and might earn her the next. "Sir," she said, voice pitched to reach row 3, without sounding like a shout. "May I see ID with the boarding pass?" Richard chuckled in his seat. Not a laugh, a diagnosis. "Some people think a hoodie is a golden ticket," he murmured, just loud enough. Malcolm's gaze flicked to him for half a second, then back to Tracy. He didn't blink. The aisle stalled. Someone exhaled in irritation. Someone else watched with the wary hunger of people who sense a moment stepping over a line. The orchid at the bulkhead trembled when a bag brushed past, a single white petal shaking as if it had opinions. Tracy stepped closer, frown pinched to a point. She could have scanned. She could have, and didn't. There was quiet power in the way he held his silence, and it made her want to fill it with authority. She inhaled and decided. Tracy leaned closer, eyes narrowed. "Sir, this ticket looks fake." The air inside the cabin shifted, a current no one could name. Malcolm Everett hadn't moved from the edge of 2 Amperes, but every eye within 3 rows tilted toward him now, dragged by Tracy Halloway's sharpened tone. "This ticket looks fake," she repeated, louder. The sentence clanged like metal in a quiet church. Malcolm didn't flinch. His hand rested on the worn briefcase, the leather soft from decades of use. His breathing was steady, but the silence around him thickened until it felt like turbulence before turbulence. Tracy raised her chin, letting the moment build. Her voice carried over the first-class rows with theatrical clarity. "I've seen this trick before. Sir, if you don't move, I'll have to treat this as fraud." She wanted the word to stick, fraud. A stage light she'd turned on herself, Richard Wallace swirled the ice in his glass at 3C and took his cue, smiling to the small audience around him. "These people always try to sneak in," he said, soft enough to sound offhand, loud enough to reach row 4. "You can tell just by looking." The remark landed like a slap across the cabin. Someone coughed. Someone else looked away quickly. Mrs. Lorraine Carter in 4D straightened, her hands gripping the armrest so tight her knuckles ached. She wanted to speak, wanted to cut through the venom of it, but she held her tongue, her heart beating heavy in her chest. Malcolm finally turned his head. His eyes found Richard, calm and deliberate, before returning to Tracy. His voice was even unhurried. "Are you sure you want to do this?" The question was not a defense. It was a line of chalk on a floor no one else could see. Tracy blinked, caught between the authority she was performing and the chill of his composure. She doubled down. "What I'm sure of," she announced, "is that this boarding pass doesn't match the passenger in front of me." Murmurs rippled backward through the rows. Passengers leaned into the aisle, trying to catch the scene with their eyes, some with their phones. In 6 amperes, the teen streamer raised her camera a little higher, her live chat pulsing faster caps, emojis, questions flying like sparks. The cockpit door slid open. Captain Robert Mills stepped into the galley, hat tucked under his arm. His stride was measured, clipped to the rhythm of regulation. He'd heard the noise in his headset and come to settle it before pushback. His voice cut clean across the cabin. "What's the issue here? Show me the pass." Tracy turned toward him with relief, as if the system itself had arrived to validate her. "Captain, I believe this passenger is attempting to board first class with a falsified ticket." She held the phone up like evidence in a courtroom. Mills didn't glance at Malcolm first. He looked at Tracy. She was crew. She was procedure, and procedure was the spine of his world. "All right, sir," he said firmly, extending a hand toward Malcolm. "Boarding pass." Malcolm handed over the phone without a word. The barcode glowed in Captain Mills's palm. He scanned quickly against the handheld device. The reader beeped a crisp, approving green. "Seat 2 amperes. Name, Everett, Malcolm." The result made Mills pause, just a fraction too long. His training told him the machine was never wrong, but Tracy's eyes were hard with certainty. Tracy pressed in. "Captain, the digital ticket can be manipulated. We can't just—" Malcolm interrupted softly, eyes fixed on Mills now. "Are you sure you want to do this?" The cabin fell into a hush so sharp you could hear the ring light hum at 6 amperes. Richard Wallace shifted, suddenly less comfortable in his reclined throne, though his smirk lingered stubbornly. Mrs. Lorraine Carter's chest burned as if she'd swallowed fire. She wanted to stand, to defend, but her muscles locked. Instead, she whispered under her breath, barely audible, "Lord, not again." Tracy's patience snapped into a blade. Her voice rose, cutting off hesitation. "If he doesn't move, I'm calling security." The words hung suspended. A threat, drawn taut. Every passenger felt the weight of it, the way a plane feels gravity before takeoff, when the engines hold still just long enough to make silence deafening. The silence Tracy Holloway left hanging in the air seemed to grip the cabin by the throat. Passengers shifted in their seats, restless, while the hum of the ventilation turned harsh, metallic. Malcolm Everett didn't argue. He lowered himself into 2 amperes, half sitting, half leaning, as if the seat had been his all along. He set the old briefcase down, unhurried, and reached for his phone. "All right," he said quietly. One word shaped like a gavel. Tracy barked out a laugh that didn't match her eyes. "Calling your lawyer already?" she said, arms folded. Her tone was a dare. From 3C, Richard Wallace was ready with another jab, voice pitched to ripple across the rows. "What's next? He'll say he owns the airline?" The chuckle that followed was smug, as though he'd already secured the audience's applause. Malcolm didn't meet his gaze. He unlocked his phone with a smooth press of his thumb and dialed a number without hesitation, as if he had rehearsed this step many times. No hurry, no panic, just inevitability. The teen in 6 amperes noticed before anyone else. Her ring light caught a glint from Malcolm's phone, and instinct pulled her camera higher. Her live chat detonated. "Boarding drama! He's making a call!" "Who's he dialing?" She angled the lens, whispering for her viewers, "Y'all, this about to get wild." Mrs. Lorraine Carter leaned forward in 4D, her hand gripping the seatback in front of her. The woman's voice was low, urgent, almost prayerful. "Hold on." Tracy tilted her head, impatience sharpening her profile. "Sir, if you think dialing a number will change anything." She stopped, because Malcolm had already lifted the phone to his ear. He wasn't explaining himself. He wasn't raising his voice. He simply waited for the line to open, eyes steady on nothing. And everything, the world inside the cabin, shrank to the quiet click of connection. The hum of the engines outside seemed to fade. Passengers bent closer, some holding breath, others clutching phones, but not daring to record too openly. The stream from 6 amperes rolled on, capturing the moment frame by frame. The calm man in 2 amperes, the flight attendant hovering with authority eroding by the second, the audience of strangers frozen mid-breath. Tracy's smile flickered like a bad bulb. She hadn't expected him to move so calmly, so deliberately. There was something about the way he sat, hoodie soft, briefcase scarred, phone against his ear, that made her certainty wobble. Malcolm didn't argue. He just dialed, and everything shifted. The phone against Malcolm Everett's ear clicked once, twice, then steadied into the silence of a private line. He didn't announce himself. He didn't explain. He spoke only a few quiet words, almost too soft for those around him to hear. In the galley, Tracy Holloway stood stiff, arms crossed like a shield. The pause unsettled her. "Sir, I don't know who you think you're calling, but..." A voice bled through the receiver, clipped and decisive. Linda Harrington, chairwoman of the airline. Everyone in the corporate tower knew her cadence, flat as glass, sharp as ice. Malcolm gave her no preamble, no introduction, just a few calm syllables. She answered with an order. "Do not move that aircraft. This flight is grounded. Effective immediately." The words rang through the earpiece, and Malcolm lowered the phone just enough for the sentence to land in the space between them. Passengers stilled. Captain Robert Mills, who had been watching this standoff with the measured composure of a man trained to trust process above all, received the radio crackle in his headset. At the same moment, he froze mid-step. The voice repeated, "Ground this flight. Corporate directive." He pressed the button, his voice gravel dry. "Say that again? Corporate is grounding this flight?" A pause, then the confirmation. "Copy that. Do not depart." The cockpit felt far away. The jet bridge, still attached, seemed suddenly like a lifeline rather than a routine delay. Mills turned, his jaw tight. "Copy." When he faced the cabin again, all eyes were waiting, Tracy's included. "What's happening?" she demanded, voice high, stretched. Mills looked at her, steady but not reassuring. "Did you file something wrong?" The question wasn't just procedural. It was suspicion. It struck her harder than Malcolm's silence ever had. Her lips parted, but no explanation came. In 3C, Richard Wallace lost his smirk for the first time. His hand set the glass down without the clink of ice. The stream from 6 amperes zoomed tighter, catching the captain's face, Tracy's rigid stance, Malcolm's unmoving calm. The chat roared. "Corporate grounded? Wait, what? Who is this guy?" Mills lowered the radio, shoulders heavy under the weight of something bigger than his checklists. His voice, when it came, was taut as a fraying rope. "Corporate just grounded us." The cabin erupted not in screams but in that fractured chorus of gasps. Whispers, frantic questions, the sound of order tilting into chaos. The cabin door hissed open, the sound sharper than applause. Jet bridge air spilled back inside, carrying the scent of coffee from the terminal and the charged hush of disruption. A pair of managers in navy suits stepped through first, followed by two corporate security officers in plain dark jackets. Their shoes struck the aisle like punctuation. Tracy Halloway spun toward them, relief already shaping her voice. Finally, I followed protocol, exactly as trained. This passenger. She gestured at Malcolm Everett, still composed in 2 amperes. Briefcase, resting like a sentry by his knee. The lead manager cut her off, voice clipped but calm. Policy never required humiliation, Miss Halloway. The sentence landed harder than any raised shout. Passengers murmured, a ripple of recognition. Lorraine Carter in 4D let out a soft exhale, almost a prayer. The teen in 6 amperes mouthed "Oh my God" into her phone, her chat exploding into capital letters and flame emojis. Tracy's hands shook, though she tried to fold them neatly at her waist. I was protecting the airline, she insisted. I had reason to. Captain Robert Mills raised a hand, the motion firm enough to steady a rocking aircraft. His voice carried down the aisle. Everyone, stay seated. Remain calm. His eyes fixed on Tracy. Stand down. Tracy, this is bigger than us. The security officers moved with quiet precision. They didn't touch her, didn't force her, but their presence boxed her in. One of the managers unclipped the silver badge pinned on her chest, fingers careful but final. The hollow click of metal leaving fabric was louder than the engines outside. Phones lifted higher. A camera shutter snapped. The badge lay flat in the manager's palm, then slid into a pocket. The symbol of authority was gone, and with it, the control she had worn like armor. Tracy's voice cracked. I did what I was supposed to. You can't. But no one answered. The cabin had already shifted away from her. Malcolm Everett opened his laptop. The screen's glow rising like a quiet lighthouse in the dimmed cabin. He didn't glance at Tracy, didn't address the officers, didn't seek approval from anyone. His fingers rested above the keys as if ready to resume a different world, one where he had never been questioned. His silence was absolute, and in it lay more weight than her protests. The teen streamer whispered into her mic, Yo, they took her badge. She's done. Every passenger understood. The balance of power had tipped, irreversible. The badge left Tracy's chest, and so did her control. The aircraft never left the gate. The door stayed open, the jet bridge still locked in place, like a vein tethering the plane to the terminal. Passengers murmured in clusters, phones buzzing with half-formed headlines. The scent of stale coffee and recirculated air hung heavy. Malcolm Everett remained in 2 amperes, laptop angled on the tray table, fingers resting quietly on the keyboard, as if every word he chose might anchor the storm outside. Above them, in a paneled conference room 5 states away, Linda Harrington's voice cut through the chaos. Effective immediately. Open a full review. Suspend the involved crew until further notice. Papers rustled, keyboards clicked, and a flurry of urgent emails flooded out to every corner of the airline's chain of command. No spin yet, no press release. Just blunt containment. Ava Morales, the junior flight attendant, sat in the crew galley, eyes on the carpet, hands clenched together. She had stayed silent during the confrontation, frozen between loyalty and instinct. Now, the weight pressed too hard. She signed her name on the digital incident form and wrote in measured strokes, Miss Halloway escalated without scanning. Passenger presented valid ticket. I confirm refusal to verify electronically. Her chest loosened slightly after pressing submit, though her eyes burned with the shame of not having spoken sooner. In his quarters, Captain Robert Mills drafted his official report. He stared at the cursor before typing. Boarding pass scanned. Valid. Escalation continued at crew discretion. Passenger maintained composure. Captain complied with corporate directive. His hands hovered. He had always believed procedure was infallible. That policy safeguarded fairness. But the screen glared back at him, proof that even procedure could blind. He added a final line. Personal note. Process must not replace judgment. Then he signed. Malcolm typed far fewer words. His message went only to a handful of internal contacts. No reassignments until review concludes. Maintain flight crew roster integrity. He hit send. It wasn't anger. It was control. Somewhere along the corporate intranet, a draft of the internal memo leaked. A journalist's inbox chimed. And within minutes, newsrooms were stirring. Phrases like crew suspension, potential misconduct, and CEO on board began to surface. Screens across the terminal outside the plane flickered with breaking tickers. Back in 4D, Mrs. Lorraine Carter scrolled her phone, heart pounding at the headlines already forming. She whispered to herself, not to anyone else. It's not just one flight. It never was. And in the conference room, Linda Harrington looked up from the table, her voice low, final. This isn't about one flight. It's about the whole system. By morning, the story had slipped its leash. Screens across the terminal blinked with the same clip, looped and captioned in bold text. Tracy Holloway's voice rose first, clear and sharp. Sir, this ticket looks fake. Then the reply from Richard Wallace at 3. See, smug and careless. These people always try to sneak in. You can tell just by looking. The video froze on Richard's smirk, then jump cut to the reveal. Malcolm Everett, Chief Executive Officer. The name hit harder than any turbulence. Twitter feeds swarmed with hashtags number boarding bias, number Everett on board, number grounded gate. Comment sections boiled over, half outrage, half awe. Memes spliced Malcolm's calm stare with taglines like unbothered CEO energy. The teen streamer's live capture had already been shared across platforms. Each retweet, multiplying the shock. Passengers in other cities watched the replay on morning news shows, coffee cooling in their mugs. Anchors traded solemn looks while the chyron scrolled. Airline grounds. Flight. After CEO. Accused of ticket fraud. In a cramped crew room, Captain Robert Mills sat hunched over his phone. The video played again and again, and each time he heard his own voice. What's the issue here? Show me the pass. The words that once felt like discipline now sounded like surrender. He folded the phone face down on the table and stared at the floor, silent. Linda Harrington's corporate tower buzzed like a nest kicked open. Press lines jammed, analysts hammered out op-eds, investors demanded calls, yet her statement hadn't been released. She sat with her team, arms crossed, eyes locked on the word Everett as if daring anyone to flinch. And in a downtown office, Richard Wallace discovered his own face splashed across 1,000 feeds. His sentence, careless, cruel, tossed off like a dart, was now immortalized in meme format, captioned with fire emojis and disbelief. You can tell just by looking. He scrolled past one edit, then another, each sharper than the last. His throat dried. His pulse skittered. The smirk that had seemed so natural now looked grotesque, exaggerated by freeze frames. In 4D, Mrs. Lorraine Carter watched from her phone, with tears pressing behind her eyes. She whispered into her empty living room, Lord, they finally see. The stream chat at 6 amperes still raged, though the teen had long left the plane, replays stacked like dominoes. In bold letters across the bottom of one viral clip, the caption sealed the truth. Malcolm Everett. He's the CEO. The bright lights of the local TV studio hit harder than the cameras inside the cabin ever had. Tracy Holloway sat stiff-backed, uniform pressed, but hollow without its badge. Her hair was immaculate, makeup sharp, but sweat gathered under her collar. She folded her hands in her lap, forcing her voice into something rehearsed. He didn't look like a first-class passenger, she told the anchor, eyes darting sideways. I was protecting the airline. You have to understand, we face this sort of thing all the time. The anchor's smile was thin as glass. Protecting the airline? Or protecting an assumption? The question hung in the studio air like static. Tracy tried to steady herself, but each answer unraveled faster than she could patch it. There was no clear procedure. It was an unusual situation. I acted in good faith. Clips rolled behind her on a wall of screens. Her voice declaring, "Fake." Richard Wallace sneering, "You can tell just by looking." Malcolm Everett, calm as stone. The footage played over her words, undermining them with every loop. Meanwhile, in a windowless conference room at headquarters, the HR panel faced her with colder eyes than any anchor. The lead investigator tapped a screen. The cabin footage played again, this time with timestamps. Audio crisp enough to catch every intake of breath. "Policy never required humiliation," the manager repeated, flat. Tracy's defenses frayed. "The system failed me," she insisted. "No clear rules for passengers who don't appear to belong." Ava Morales, summoned as witness, lifted her eyes from folded notes. Her voice was quiet but steady. "He showed a valid digital boarding pass. I suggested scanning. She refused. The escalation was her choice." Ava's words landed like a verdict. Tracy's breath hitched. "I followed." The investigator raised a hand. "You followed prejudice, not procedure." Then came the final blow. "Effective immediately, your employment is terminated." The case will be referred to the FAA for review. Across the city, Richard Wallace faced his own reckoning. His company's PR team issued a bland white paper apology in his name. "I spoke out of turn. I regret it." No cameras, no confrontation, just words pushed into the world like a reluctant offering. Yet the internet had already tried him. Jury swift, punishment merciless. Tracy sat as the HR panel rose. The room emptied around her, the echo of their shoes fading. She stared at the table, stripped of uniform, stripped of script. The decision was signed, stamped, and final, before the plane she tried to control had even left the ground. Her downfall was written before the aircraft ever moved an inch. The press hall at headquarters pulsed with the low thrum of anticipation. Rows of cameras pointed toward the stage, lights hot and blinding. Reporters shuffled in their seats, pens ready, recorders blinking. The world was waiting for the airline's first official word. Linda Harrington stepped to the podium in a navy suit so precise it looked pressed by silence itself. She did not smile. She did not fumble with notes. She looked out across the room as though the chaos of the last 72 hours was only a file to be read and resolved. "First," she said, voice clear and clipped, "the events on Flight 228 were unacceptable. I take full responsibility as chairwoman. On behalf of this company, I apologize to our passengers, to our employees, and most of all to Mr. Malcolm Everett." Flashbulbs burst like gunfire. Linda didn't blink. She tapped the stack of papers in front of her once, then laid them flat. "Effective immediately, we are instituting what will be called the Everett Clause." She paused, letting the words settle. The phrase already hummed in the air like it had been rehearsed in the public's mind. 4 measures are included. 1. Mandatory electronic verification of all boarding passes, logged and time-stamped. No exceptions. 2. Compulsory anti-bias training for all crew, tied directly to promotion eligibility. 3. A passenger complaint protocol, guaranteeing response within 72 hours, and unique tracking numbers for every case. 4. Independent audits of our boarding process, with results published quarterly. Each point dropped like iron nails into the foundation of a new structure. The reporters scribbled madly, already writing tomorrow's lead. A hand shot up in the front row. What about Richard Wallace's remarks? Is there disciplinary action for passengers who contribute to hostile environments? Linda's jaw set, but her voice was calm. This is not about punishing individuals. It's about shifting culture. A culture that failed in front of the world, and one we will rebuild in the open. Behind the cameras, screens flickered with Malcolm's name. Yet he was not at the podium. He was in an office down the hall, reviewing the draft of the Everett Clause line by line, his pen scratching only once to change a comma into a period. No speech, no spotlight, just precision. Out on the street, news vans lined the curb. Protesters held signs. Dignity has no class section. Everett Clause now. Drivers slowed to honk in solidarity. The story had burned beyond aviation. It was about belonging, about respect, about systems too brittle to survive without reform. Inside the press hall, Linda folded her notes. A single headline was already composing itself across 1,000 screens. The Everett Clause is coming. The studio was dark, lit only by a single key light that cut a pale circle across the table. No applause, no teleprompter, no corporate backdrop, just a camera's red dot and the man in the chair. Malcolm Everett sat with his hands folded, posture straight, hoodie traded for a plain black jacket. His voice carried the steadiness of someone who had learned power did not need to be raised. The interviewer leaned forward. "Mr. Everett, you've said little publicly. Why now?" Malcolm's gaze didn't waver. "Because this isn't about me. It's about what happens next." His words came slowly, chosen as if each was weighed on a scale before release. The interviewer glanced at notes. "You were accused of fraud in front of an entire cabin, humiliated in public. Surely that was personal." He exhaled, not in anger, but in precision. Personal? Yes, but anger isn't the story. The story is the machinery that let a uniform override fact. The reflex that told passengers to doubt before to check. That's the danger. The insult was a symptom. The system is the disease. The studio held still. No coughs, no camera shuffle, only the measured tick of Malcolm's syllables. "What about Richard Wallace?" the interviewer pressed. His remark, "You can tell just by looking," is now viral. Do you hold him responsible? Malcolm's eyes softened, but his tone cut deeper than judgment. He wasn't the problem. He was the mirror, a reflection of what too many believe, but don't say out loud. He gave words to a bias that already lived in the room. You don't fix a mirror by breaking it. You fix what it reveals. The camera held on his face. The silence afterward was louder than commentary. Across town, in a quiet living room, Mrs. Lorraine Carter sat on her sofa, tablet balanced on her lap. She leaned close, glasses slipping down her nose, heart pressing against her ribs. When Malcolm's voice paused, she whispered to herself, barely audible, "Finally." The interviewer cleared his throat. "So if not about you, then what?" Malcolm leaned slightly forward, hands still clasped. "This is about accountability baked into structure. Not temporary apologies, not a face on a screen. A rulebook that makes dignity the baseline. That's why the Everett Clause matters. Because the next time someone tries to strip a passenger of their place, the system itself will stop them before a human can fail." His voice dropped, softer, yet sharper than before. "This isn't about me. It's about what happens next." The light above him dimmed. The red dot of the camera blinked out, but the sentence stayed burning, already moving outward into 1,000 living rooms, 1,000 waiting ears. By the end of the week, the story had left the airline behind and landed squarely on the nation's desk. Morning shows replayed the cabin clip side by side with the press conference. Hosts debating whether the Everett Clause was a landmark reform or a warning that the industry had ignored for too long. In Washington, the FAA convened a roundtable under harsh fluorescent lights. Regulators, union leaders, airline executives, and advocates sat shoulder to shoulder around the wide table. Piles of binders clutched in their arms, each stamped with bias in boarding procedures. The chair cleared his throat. "We are opening an investigation across all carriers. This is no longer one airline's embarrassment. It's an industry reckoning." Cameras outside caught the procession of officials. Headlines lit up. FAA to probe boarding discrimination nationwide. The Everett Clause was already becoming a model, and carriers rushed to adopt it before regulators forced their hands. Delta, United, Southwest, each issued statements by the hour. We will implement parallel measures immediately. Some used different names, but the DNA was the same. At a quiet gate in Dallas, Captain Robert Mills sat with a cup of stale coffee, staring at his reflection on the surface. He had watched his own words replayed on television and had read transcripts in print. The sentence he never thought he'd say echoed now in his head. He murmured it under his breath to a younger co-pilot. I thought I understood policy. That day, I realized policy can blind you if you let it. The co-pilot didn't answer, just nodded, hearing the weight inside the confession. Communities across the country filled the air with stories. Black passengers on talk shows described being questioned for sitting in exit rows, for carrying too small a bag in first class, for nothing at all but the look on their faces. Hashtags multiplied, threads piled up. The Wallace remark became shorthand in essays, textbooks in progress, training slides being drafted by consultants overnight. You can tell just by looking. It was quoted with fury, with sorrow, with exhaustion. In living rooms from Atlanta to Oakland, elders watched Malcolm Everett's interview replay, not because they hadn't seen it already, but because the cadence, the restraint, the refusal to shout felt like balm. Finally, someone said it plainly. Callers told radio hosts. Finally, it's on record. Back at headquarters, Linda Harrington's office windows glared out over the city. She knew the Everett Clause had left her grasp. It was no longer hers to defend or own, it was public property now. A benchmark that other industries would cite, adapt, dilute, or weaponize. The headlines didn't care. For the first time, the system flinched. The private jet sat at the edge of the tarmac, its silver body catching the last streaks of dusk. Beyond the window, the runway lights stretched in quiet procession, blinking like patient sentinels against the dark. Inside the cabin, silence reigned, not the strained hush of confrontation, but a stillness earned. Malcolm Everett sat by the window, jacket folded neatly over the seatback. The old leather briefcase rested on the table beside him, closed now, its worn spine no longer a point of scrutiny, but simply a companion. He slid the laptop shut with a soft click. The glow extinguished. No more memos to draft, no directives to send. The clause had been written, signed, released into the bloodstream of an industry too slow to change, until forced. His part was finished. The new flight attendant approached, nerves barely masked by her steady smile. She leaned slightly toward him, voice respectful, but genuine. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Everett." The phrase was ordinary, the kind spoken to thousands of travelers every day, yet here it landed with the weight of something reclaimed. Malcolm inclined his head in thanks. He didn't need the recognition, but he received the words like a note resolved in a long, unfinished song. In another city, on another screen, Mrs. Lorraine Carter sat in her living room, television muted. She'd seen enough panels and debates to last a lifetime. What stayed with her now was simpler. The image of a man who had kept his dignity while the world tried to strip it away. She whispered to the quiet room, "They'll remember this one." Back in the jet, engines purred to life, soft and low. The runway lights blurred into ribbons as the aircraft edged forward. Malcolm watched without expression, but his chest rose and fell with the rhythm of someone who knew the work ahead no longer required his presence. Systems would carry his name where his voice would not. The sky outside opened wide, black and endless, stars scattered like truth too long ignored. The hum of takeoff built, smooth and certain. The world had shifted, and he carried no need to announce it. The attendant's greeting lingered in the air, the simplest of epilogues, the quietest of victories. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Everett. Thanks for staying with us through this story." These aren't just headlines or viral clips. They're lived moments that reveal how dignity, bias, and power collide in everyday places. If you've listened this far, it means you're invested in hearing voices that don't always get amplified. That matters. If this story struck you, hit the subscribe button. This channel is where we break down real events with the drama of a Netflix series, but the weight of lived truth. Every week, we bring you stories that challenge assumptions, expose the cracks in the system, and remind us that the smallest exchange, a boarding pass, a word in the aisle, can shift into something bigger.